Welcome back, everybody, to Tanya in Real Life. So excited to be here. It's been a long time. It's been actually almost, maybe it's a month since we last learned Tanya, and it's exciting to be back. But as a bridge to getting back into the text, I wanted to start with a question that somebody asked, and today basically and I think that will be a way of also refreshing our memory on what we've been talking about, in the past, in the earlier prakim, in the earlier chapters of the Tanya. So someone asked, how does Tanya help support my healing from trauma? What does Tanya say about healing from trauma? The person who asked is working with a therapist, and she wants to know, how does this support trauma? And we put out this question today, just a couple of hours ago, and I see that it's a very, very, very important topic because so many people responded right away with questions and comments. And one person even asked, like, she felt that, she also was working with trauma and dealing with trauma. And she said that she felt that, the Tanya is so focused on the mind and her trauma is in her body. How does that coincide? How does that actually work? So she'd been wondering about that apparent contradiction. And she was happy for the opportunity to have this topic aired out. And honestly, when this topic came up, I really wanted to skip it, to be honest, and not answer it, because there's so much pain around trauma. There's so much hurt, and I'm afraid. My worst fear is that I will hurt somebody by not really, by coming across, at least, as not understanding the depth of that pain. And so I just want to say that don't take anything that I'm saying, and don't take anything that anyone ever says as a be all and end all. I hope it's just another layer of understanding of this very complex topic. And it's also, even within Tanya, I'm just going to share some thoughts on the chapters that we already learned. There's so much more to be explored. There's so much more to discover. And let's hope that it's a good conversation. And I feel very, especially since we put out the topic, and the amount of feedback and like questions and sharing that are right away flooded came in right away. I realize how important this topic is, and it's making me even more afraid of addressing it. But I'm going to ask, I'm going to ask everybody to be open, take this as another layer, a little bit more of insight, and definitely after I'll speak for a little bit, and then I'm eager to hear your questions, and let's share some. I want to hear your experiences and your victories in this important work. Okay, so let's jump in. And again, we'll be back at this topic because I see it's such an important thing. So as going forward in the upcoming chapters, I'll keep in mind that this is a question, this is an area of work that people want to be included as we talk about Tanya in general. Okay, so in the first 11 prakim, in the first 11 chapters of Tanya, our big focus was on the anatomy of our inner worlds, on the anatomy of the way our hearts and minds work, and how we have two drives, two inner selves that are in constant battle, trying to control, take charge of our consciousness, of our conscious thoughts, of our behaviors, of the things that we say. And all that was a language in which we could have a conversation about any and every emotional challenge, including trauma. So what I'm going to try to do is just put the topic of trauma into the language that we've been using about Tanya, and hopefully that in itself will give some clarity to this topic. So what is trauma? Let's just clarify what we're talking about, because sometimes a person could say, I was so traumatized I couldn't find parking. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about trauma as an emotional response to a very distressful terrible event, like an accident or the loss of life or a very tragic experience or abuse or a natural disaster. And when we talk about healing from trauma, we're obviously not talking about making those events and those circumstances, those situations, or the past disappear, because that's not possible. We're talking about dealing with the impact that that had on a person. Trauma has a serious impact on a person. It interrupts a person's mind and the whole system of operation. It interrupts when we experience trauma as children, it interrupts our growth, our emotional growth as children, and has a deep impact on our inner world. Um, and then there are, that's childhood trauma. And then there are other traumatic experiences that are not necessarily from our childhood, but even from our adult life. Like if a person had a very a traumatic experience at in a surgery, or a traumatic experience at birth, or in a car accident as an adult, that can also have a very serious, deep impact on the person. And the bottom line question that people have in facing trauma and dealing with trauma is, how can I feel whole when I am so broken inside? How can I restore myself, to my feeling of aliveness, to my feeling of being whole and strong and dignified and worthy and complete? And when we talk about broken, it's not even so much the event itself that broke the person necessarily. It could be anything. What matters, in other words, the event is not as important as the impact that it had on the person. What matters more is the impact. The person experienced something that left them feeling broken. And someone who is sensitive, like many of us are, might have been very seriously impacted and deeply affected by just having a lot of yelling in growing up, a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress going on around them, which was low key relative to a terrible disaster or outright physical, emotional, psychological, sexual abuse. It could be much more low key than, incomparable to that in the sense of the magnitude of a one-time incident, but over a period of time has the same effect and same impact on that person. So again, it's not so much about the events itself, but the impact that it has on and on a person and the body's response to it, the mind and the heart's response to that. My personal belief about trauma, and this is really, I hope this is not going to be offensive to anybody, but my personal belief about trauma is that every single one of us has experienced trauma on some level in our lives. And when I say this, I don't mean to minimize the profound tragedy of serious, terrible trauma. When I say that every person experienced trauma, my point is that every person needs to know how to deal with trauma and how to heal from trauma, because we all experienced situations in our childhood or even in our adult life that left us feeling alone and isolated, rejected, dismissed, um, terribly hurt, afraid, helpless, um, and very vulnerable and unsafe. All of us have experienced those experiences in our childhood, those emotions in our childhood, and that's true regardless of what the actual event that triggered that emotion. The important thing is that we felt alone, we felt afraid, we felt helpless, we felt totally rejected and dismissed. And definitely somebody who experienced a more severe level of trauma or felt these emotions more profoundly has to work harder, because the trauma is more devastating. At the same time, for all trauma, the language and the path to healing is the same. And when the impact is more severe, we also need outside help, because our own self is so limited, and really our self is the source of our healing. Our deeper self is always going to be that source of our healing. But when our self feels so limited and we can't access our deeper self, we really need outside help. When we feel that kind of broken, we need outside help, and that's why I'm all for people getting that kind of help that we need. And none of that, what I'm saying now, should be taken as a substitute for having somebody literally hold your hand and walk you through the brokenness to help you feel whole again, because sometimes we cannot access that place inside of us on our own. I'm also very much praying for and anticipating a time when professionals will use the ideas in the Tanya to support healing, because I really believe that as Jewish people, we can't separate our spiritual selves from our emotional selves. Just like we need to deal with the trauma that's in our bodies, and we know that it's not just a matter of our mind and our heart. We also need to, and not just also, but I feel like the essence of our cure and the greatest strength, our greatest asset on the journey towards our healing is our neshama. It's our infinity. It's that essence, that essence of really who we are, our preciousness, that part of us that's untouchable by trauma. And if we can access that, it could bring a flood of so much healing into our lives. So I'm davening and working towards that day when professionals will have the ideas of Tanya and will use them in healing trauma, because we can all benefit from this healing and from the language and the insight into our own psyche that the Tanya brings, that's unique to Tanya. So what is the language of Tanya for trauma? And before we say that, I want to just summarize the language of science. In science, we hear about the part of the brain that's called the amygdala, the part of the brain that waves a red flag and pulls that alarm bell when that's overstimulated and hyperactive or frozen, and it rings an alarm and sounds that awakens the whole system, hyperarousal, that danger is happening even when there's no actual danger. And I would call this, in my own words, I would call it that we have a part of our brain that gives us a false reading. It's as if the traumatic event is happening now, and our bodies react in the way as if it's happening right now. So our amygdala is giving us a false reading. Our brain is giving us a false reading on something that's happening. And in Tanya, we learn about the Nefesh HaBahamis and how it gives us false readings on just about everything, not just about danger, but about pleasure and about relationships and indeed about who we are. So we have a part in us, according to the Tanya, that is giving us false readings on just about every experience that we encounter in our lives. Our Nefesh HaBahamis, our animal self, looks at an uncomfortable situation and waves a red flag that says, danger, danger, stay away, get out of here. Let's get ourselves safe. We're not going to survive this. If we go through this, we're going to die, right? That's the voice of our Nefesh HaBahamis. And this is true for everybody, for every one of us, regardless of our traumatic experiences. Now, there's another two important details that I want to mention that maybe are sometimes overlooked. First of all, our Nefesh HaBahamis is called Nefesh HaBahamis. It's called our animal self, but really it's our default setting. It's our human dimension. It's the part of us that is who we are when we're not consciously, actively switching on our neshama, putting our neshama into our driver's seat. Whenever we're not consciously aligned and aligning our minds, our consciousness with Hashem, with our neshama, we are in our default setting, which is our animal self, our human dimension. And it takes a lot of effort and cognitive maturity to put our neshama in charge of into our driver's seat. It takes a lot of effort and cognitive maturity. And that's why, as I believe that as children, our Nefesh HaBahamis has so much control over us, because when we experience something, a traumatic experience or a stressful experience, or even just an unpleasant situation in our childhood, our Nefesh HaBahamis makes decisions about what is now our Nefesh HaBahamis makes decisions that become our core beliefs for the rest of our lives. Our Nefesh HaBahamis will always give us a false reading because it judges, it assesses, it makes meaning out of our experiences that leave Hashem out of the picture. And because Hashem is out of the picture, of course, it's going to be less than who we are. It's going to be lonely. It's going to be fearful. It's going to be negative and even toxic. And yet, because we're children, it's going to be accepted in our systems as a foundational core belief. So our core beliefs are formed before we have the cognitive ability to process our experiences in a mature way that puts our nefesh elikis, our neshama, in charge. We process our experiences according to our humanness, right? According to how we are naturally wired, according to our nefesh habahamis. And if we are sensitive people, we could easily decide that we are, hey, if I am a kid and an adult in my life, a parent or a teacher screams at me, right? It could be that they're having a very hard day, but as a kid, I'm going to decide that they hate me. Not only that they hate me, but that I am unlovable and that I am the cause of all the evil in the world, right? I'm sure many of you can relate to feeling that way. But we make these important decisions based on an emotional response to an unpleasant experience. And before we have the cognitive maturity to process it in context of the truth of who we really are and the truth of who Hashem is. And our Nefesh HaBahamis seeks full control of our minds and hearts. So each and every one of us, this is why I believe that every one of us has trauma to process, because all of us come into our adulthood with the Nefesh HaBahamis already having been in charge for so much of our lives and have taken charge of, our Nefesh HaBahamis has already taken charge of so much of our subconscious beliefs, our core beliefs, the decisions that we made about ourselves that we're not even aware that they're there, right? Remember we said the essence of what ego is, the essence of klipa, the essence of what the Nefesh HaBahamis represents is what the Baal Tanya told us in Perek Vav is that we see ourselves as if we are davar nifrad b'fnei atzmai, something separate, alone, isolated, rejected, worthless, right? And that makes us afraid to trust other people. This has, it gets in our way of connecting with other people. So by the time we get to adulthood, we have many of our core beliefs are, instead of being aligned with, I am here in this world by Hashem, with Hashem, for Hashem, I am here in this, we have this idea, our core foundational beliefs about ourselves, about the way the world works, about the way relationships work, about how love comes and goes. It's based on this idea of davar nifrad b'fnei atzmai, of I am alone in this world. This place is this world is a very scary place. And all the other essential core ideas that are so much in common with what trauma is. And so what do we do about this? I want to share my own personal experience with this. Years ago, when I was just in the beginning of doing this work of my own learning and my own discovery of my awesome self, my neshama, I was with a friend. I was working with her on a project, and I was feeling I told her at one point that I'm feeling I said, I'm feeling like not clean between me and Hashem. I feel like something is off. I'm not aligned with what I'm trying to do in my life. And she asked me to tell her what it was about. And I said, I'm feeling really resentful, really, 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 really hurt. And this keeps happening. I keep getting in, this was in a specific relationship, but that I was telling her about, that I just keep feeling so broken and so lost and so helpless and so rejected and dismissed. And this person is somebody who has known me since I was a kid, and she's a wonderful person and a really good friend. And she said, Shterna, I want to tell you something. I know you for a long time, and I know two different parts of you. I know two different sides of you. And she stood up and she started imitating me. She said, I know the Shterna who's like, she said, oh, teaching, and you're going to shop in the co-op, in the Park Slope Food Co-op, and you're going here and you're cooking, and she like imitated my adult self. And then she said, and I know there's a part of you that, and she started putting her thumb in her mouth and curling her hair. And she's like, I know that part of you that feels so insecure and, gets so shy and awkward and uncomfortable and in your own skin. And that part of you is you. That part of you is you. And you have this little girl inside of you who feels rejected and broken, and it's got nothing to do with this relationship. This relationship is only triggering that girl wakes up in this relationship. That girl is needy in this relationship. That girl is crying from pain. That girl doesn't like this relationship because it triggers her hurt, her rejection, her brokenness. And she said, take care. Take care of that little girl. Take care of her. Embrace her, love her, hold her in your arms. Be nice to her, be compassionate to her. Just be there for her. And you'll see everything is going to change. And as I was listening to her, and she's a real drama queen and an amazing, she has such beautiful language, and she was imitating me with exaggerating my behavior and my also not just my strengths and also my weaknesses, and I was listening to her. Literally, I started crying because I really identified with the brokenness, that she was and the insecurity and the inner chaos and turmoil and confusion that she was describing so gorgeously, so exquisitely. And I went home and I did a lot of journaling, and I realized that what she was saying was true. And I really, for the first time in my life, I really took ownership and identified and was able to access that part of me that was insecure, that part of me that was so easily triggered by somebody else's anger, by somebody else's um, negative looks, by somebody else's even minor forms of rejection would trigger this storm, like really a storm of pain inside of me. And I started being able to access that as a brokenness. And it was that experience happened a few days before Yom Kippur, and I'd already been learning this work that we've been talking about, the ideas that I wrote about in the book, Your Awesome Self, and the ideas of the Tanya. And so I realized that that part of me is so deep and I cannot access it. It's beyond me. And only Hashem could heal me. And that subconsciously, I was really counting on other people to heal me. And that's why I was so, so, so hurt when facing that disappointment. Because this person also pointed out to me, you see, you're upset at this person, you're also upset at that person. She showed me, she helped me see how I was seeing this, how this was coming up for me in different ways. And it was a few days before Yom Kippur. That Yom Kippur, I davened like I never davened before, because I was actually, my mother-in-law was with me for that Yom Kippur. And so I didn't go to shul on Yom Kippur night. I stayed home with her and we sang the words of the davening. And I realized, I was thinking, Ki hine kachomer, we are like clay in the hands of the master. I'm misquoting the words, but so much of the words are like, we're doing teshuvah, we're acknowledging that we have put ourselves in the hands of others instead of putting ourselves in the hands of Hashem. And over that Yom Kippur, I really tried to do teshuvah. I really try to recognize that only Hashem is my power, only Hashem is my energy, my source of my life, and the source of my healing. And I really brought my brokenness to Hashem and asked Him to make me feel whole and to make me feel strong and to make me feel complete with Him and with myself. And I looking back, that was a bunch of years ago, but it was really a turning point in my life. And why am I sharing this story? Because in the context of trauma, what was that? You know, looking back, I could say, using the words that we're talking about now, I think that each of us has a part of us that is davar nifrad b'fnei atzmai, that we feel alone, that we feel broken, we feel helpless, we feel insecure, we feel like we're going to be judged and rejected and dismissed. And it's going to happen again. And it's only a matter of time before people discover our true colors. And then they'll also, reject us and hate us, etc. And everybody, in giving this words, I hope that nobody takes offense because, your brokenness is yours, and it's not, and it will have different words, and it will come from a whole different kind of place. It will come from real abuse and real tragedy, and mine was not. I'm admitting that I did not suffer the kind of abuse that I hear from other people, or the kind of chas v'shalom, those tragedies that many of you have shared with me. So I'm very humble in your presence, and I know that my experience is not yours. But the one thing that I feel that is relevant to everybody is that the road what the Tanya gives us in terms of the language is that we have parts of ourselves that are going to be severely impacted by our sense of being something other than Hashem. And in that space, being worthless, being utterly worthless, being nothing, being hateful, being the cause of all evil in the world. And then we have a part of ourselves that is infinite, and that's gorgeous. And that is our true self. And the road to healing is really accessing all of it, all of who we are, embracing all of who we are, embracing our brokenness, being compassionate to ourselves, not judging ourselves for our weaknesses, for our pain, for our trauma, for our toxicity, for our terribly unhealthy beliefs about ourselves and about other people. And at the same time, recognizing that we have false readings and we feel so attached to them. But our attachment to those false beliefs is our downfall. Our attachment to those false beliefs is going to keep us stuck in those beliefs. We're coming now from Pesach, and every single day we got to go out of Mitzrayim. And to me, going out of Mitzrayim means letting go of our imprisonment to those beliefs, to our Nefesh HaBahamis, letting go of our imprisonment to our attachment to feeling that just because I have a false reading, it is true, and that is what defines me. That's where I am. That's where I was yesterday. That's where I was the day before, and that's who I will always. It's who and what I will always be, and how my reality will always be. The tools for healing, according to what we're discussing, is very. It's also in line with somatic therapy, because in somatic therapy, it's all in the body, and it's very, very interesting because somebody asked me this question, and here's where I want to answer it, and I said it in the beginning. The Tanya seems to be all about from the mind, and really trauma is in my body. But really, if we study the words of the Tanya, when the Baal Tanya describes the system of operation and how the Nefesh HaBahamis impacts us, the Baal Tanya says the Nefesh HaBahamis, the animal self, influences its primary, begins in our heart. From there, it moves to the body, and from there, it moves to our mind. And it's the same with our neshama. It begins in our mind. From there, it goes to our bodies, and then it goes to our heart. So our bodies definitely are the bridge between our mind and our heart, and when something in our mind is in our subconscious, we can only access it through our bodies because we don't even have consciousness that it's there. And it's not a contradiction to what the Baal Tanya says, because he also says that the bridge is our bodies, between our minds and our hearts. It's first going to go through our bodies and then to our minds, or then to our hearts. Okay, so I would love to open up to some questions, and then I have more to share, but I want to open up this conversation. Much. That was very, very helpful. I'm trying to think what I could say for the recording. Somebody is just sharing how her work with EMDR is very much, she's doing EMDR along with this class, and the work is very much aligned, and it's very, very helpful to have both. So thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Such an important question. I'm going to repeat it for the recording. When we have fear, anxiety, resentment, anger, is that a signal that we are not in alignment with Hashem? Is that a signal that something is off in our alignment with Hashem? And I'm going to say yes, but I don't want anyone to use that as a way to punish yourself. Okay, because as humans, we will be pulled into fear, anxiety, resentment, and jealousy and frustration and all that, all that chaos that comes with being human. We will be pulled. So I don't want you to say, yeah, oh, something's wrong with me, I'm not in alignment. No, we're not in alignment, and that's a sign that here is where we need to do our work today, because every day we need to come into alignment with Hashem anew. Every day we're coming into it anew. We're going out of Mitzrayim every single day. And there's nothing shameful about needing to go out of Mitzrayim, because that's what Hashem wants us to do. We're going on another layer of consciousness, and another corner in our heart, another corner in our minds, another level of the brokenness. And so, yes, we are always, every time we're feeling jealous, anxious, afraid, or resentful, miserable, helpless, we're feeling sorry for ourselves. That is a sign that we're not in alignment with Hashem. But I would say it differently. Instead of saying it that I'm not in alignment, to me, that's like, oh, where's the leak? There's a flood. Where's the leak? Which faucet do I need to turn off? Which belief am I holding on to? Or where am I losing my connection? And with trauma, because trauma is so much in our bodies, and because trauma is so much, sometimes very deeply ingrained in our subconsciousness, we don't have the awareness of, where's my belief? Oh, well, I don't know. I'm fine. Nothing happened, So that's why it's important to do this in two ways. If everybody, if you can look at yourself, and this is where that woman, that friend who I'm so grateful to, was so helpful to me, because she didn't say, oh, what do you believe that's making you feel resentful? She didn't say that. She's like, there is this brokenness inside of you. Okay. This is who it is. So if each of us can look at our own selves and look at your own childhood and say, what brokenness do I have from that? Or what brokenness do I have from that specific tragic event in my life? I was speaking with somebody recently, and she experiences abandonment when her husband walks out the door to go to work. She feels abandoned. And I'm changing the details a little bit here, because I don't want, it's a personal experience, but her husband goes to work and she feels abandoned. And she doesn't know why, because she wants her husband to go to work and she wants him to be successful in his life. Why am I feeling so abandoned? And he's such a great husband, and he's so supportive, and he's always there for me. She's going out to work. Why do I feel this terrible sense of abandonment, that even my body just feels weak? And after talking with her a little bit, we realized that, she experienced abandonment in her childhood. Okay. One of her parents walked out on her family when she was a child. So that's her trauma. So once she knows, oh, my trauma is I felt so weak then. I felt so vulnerable. I didn't know who's going to take care of me in my life without my parent. What's going to be with me? And her husband, who's very supportive and she has a very successful life, walks out on her, and all of a sudden she feels abandoned. But once she has that awareness of, oh, I have this traumatic experience in my childhood that left me feeling abandoned, the work is to really invite Hashem's presence, invite God's light to that abandonment, to really, 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 meditate, pray, bring that brokenness to God's light, bring it up, embrace it, be compassionate to it, hold her, reassure her. And so when you do feel abandoned, I was talking to this lady, I'm like, your husband walks out door, you do feel abandoned, just hug yourself, be compassionate to that part of yourself that needs that extra reassurance, that needs that love, that needs that promise that you're going to take care of her, that you're never going to let her go. You'll always be there for her. And that in itself is healing. So the awareness, the compassion brings so much healing. Even the nefesh elokis first goes to the body. And that's why on the flip side of trauma, sometimes we think we need to wait till we're inspired. I'm going to wait till I feel like davening. No, that's not how it works. First, we have to act on the nefesh elokis. First, we have to act on the neshama. First, we have to bring the neshama into our physical experience. And perhaps, the Lubavitcher Rebbe took leadership, stepped up to the role of leadership when right after the Holocaust, to a very, very traumatized nation, to a very, very traumatized. We were broken. We were so broken, and perhaps this is why the Lubavitcher Rebbe so much emphasized on the practical doing mitzvahs and the practical healing of that every mitzvah brings, because we don't have time to wait till we think about Hashem enough to get our heart on board to do a mitzvah. No, we need to act on our godliness, act on our connection, act on our infinity, act on that beautiful, gorgeous light that belongs to us, act on it. And that's how we'll take it in. That's how we'll feel it. That's how we'll absorb it into our hearts. So the path to experiencing our neshama is not just through our mind. It's definitely also through our bodies, through taking practical action. So I want to thank you for bringing up that question. It's very, very important. And it's reminding me also of what I wanted to say before, because to that person who experienced abandonment in her childhood, one of the things that we talked about was actually rewriting her story, because she has the story in her mind that she was abandoned by her parent, and people know about it. And when people meet her, they sometimes feel sorry for her. Oh, you're the one who, you were abandoned, right? And really, she says she doesn't feel sorry for herself, but other people feel sorry for her. And I thought that was so gorgeous, because we really, on a certain sense, she was abandoned, but at the same time, she has the story in her mind, and she's in the process of rewriting that story of really, yeah, my parent left me, but Hashem took care of me. And, and I still had a beautiful childhood, and I'm married to a wonderful man who's supportive of me, and I have a beautiful family and a successful life. And really telling herself that story, and looking at herself from that perspective is also very healing. So, but back to your question of how could Hashem do terrible things? That's not a question that I could, that's not a question that I could answer. That's something that we don't understand. If I would understand it, I would be cruel. There is no way to, right? Because we talked about if there's room in my mind to understand it, then I'm giving it legitimacy. And there's no explanation. We need Mashiach, I appreciate what you're saying, and it's very, very important. I'm grateful to you for saying it. So some trauma runs very, very, very deep, and it's very, very hard. And still the pathway and the tools that we need to use are going to be the same. You know, whether it's somatic healing that incorporates grounding and, you know, sensory input, and or EMDR that really works with the memory of it and not so much with the actual event, right? Um, and the modality of Tanya, which is, you know, embrace and have compassion for the brokenness, no matter what it is that made us feel broken, and reach into, also get to know your deeper self, your truer self, and access, just like we could access that little girl who's broken. Let's access that infinite, gorgeous light of Hashem that we have. And how do we access it? By all the things we've been learning in the past weeks, really meditating about Hashem's greatness, meditating about every single day, taking a few seconds to say Moda'ani, and really thinking and visualize Hashem's light entering our bodies. And some people have this visualization that they do of like really a force of light flowing between Hashem and themselves, and in them and through them and from them, and be able to hold that and live from that place, and to really visualize it until it becomes a sensory seeing, to visualize it to the point of it becoming a sensory seeing is not my words, it's the words of the Baal Tanya. To actually see God as a source of your life is such a powerful activity that we can do. And when we do this every day for just a few seconds, over time, it has a tremendously powerful impact. Just like trauma, complex trauma can have an impact in a negative way, in a toxic way, in a devastating way. You know, thinking about Hashem and opening up our hearts to absorb the truth and the magnitude of and the glorious beauty of his presence within us and the value that it gives us, just over time, a little bit, exposing ourselves to it every single day, learning more Hasidus, especially with language that integrates our emotional selves, such as the classes of Rabbi Y.Y. Jacobson, you know, like where he really integrates the language, and it becomes so healing. You do this over time, and there's a principle in Torah that, and it's actually in Perek Yud Beis in Tanya as well, that any truth that exists on the negative side exists much more powerfully in the side of light. So if one person could inflict so much damage on another person, right? How much more so one person could inflict so much goodness, can unleash so much goodness on another person. And ourselves also, if we can be so hurt just by having a little bit of negativity over a long period of time, how much more so we can be healed, and we can be elevated and uplifted and feel literally healed and embraced and charged, just by a little bit of exposure and opening our hearts a little bit at a time to absorb the glorious beauty and the healing force of Hashem's light in our lives and in our own hearts. So it could be really, really powerful. So it doesn't answer the question of why did Hashem do this, but definitely, Hashem gives us the tools for healing. And I want to say this, and again, in the depths of pain, it is so hard to recognize this, but anybody who has experienced even a little bit of healing in any way can attest to the fact that the person they are is so much stronger and so much more beautiful and so much richer for having had to dig deep inside themselves and discover strengths and beauty and light that they never knew they had. And I know that's true for me, but I know you a little bit. I know it's true for you. And it's a truth that grows as we grow, right? But you see, my adult self is nothing but for God's light. And that's the difference. In psychology, we talk about a self that's a wise self, or a deeper self, or this. But in Hasidus, and then certainly in the Baal Tanya, our deepest self is an actual part of Hashem. And that is, I think, I mean, for me, that has been my greatest, I would say that's been my healing, because I can't hold my you're right, exactly what you were saying. I'm like, I can't do this. I can't do this. But when you said Hashem is doing it, that resonated with me, because that's really the only truth. You know what I mean? That's really our source of strength and healing and light. Imagine a force of light, and I want to plug into that. I want to consciously experience that light flowing through me and being me, becoming me, identifying with it as me. Meaning, when I talk about in the book that I am a carrier of Hashem's light, I don't mean it as like some light that I'm holding in my hand. I mean that my entire being is a reflection of God's light in this world. That's who I am. That's who I am. The fact that I'm walking and talking is God's animation of me at this moment, expressing that walking and talking. So it's not just, here, Hashem, you hold it for me, but Hashem, you are my power, and you're not separate from me, but you're holding me and enabling me and empowering me to hold that little girl. So it's like the little girl sitting on my lap, but I'm sitting on, I wouldn't say I'm sitting on God's lap, but I'm sitting on a very, very secure bench. I'm sitting on an infinite, unchangeable bed of worthiness, of dignity, of light. It's a rock. It's a rock. Throughout Tehillim, when David HaMelech says, Hashem Tzuri, when we want to say that, Hashem, you are my rock, that's what we mean. You're not just a God, a power in the heavens that I give it over to you. It's like, you're my rock. Is like, I can hold this little girl and take care of her because God is holding me. Do you see the difference? So I think that the key here is that if the I is davar nifrad b'fnei atzma, if we look at ourselves as a separate being, independent of God, in that place we could do nothing. And we could think that we're very powerful, and really we're taking on responsibilities that we cannot do, and we get into all kinds of unhealthiness. But if I am by Hashem, for Hashem, with Hashem and for Hashem, that I trust that Hashem doesn't want me to take on responsibilities that are too. Hashem does not want us to be miserable. Let's just get it out there. Hashem does not want us to be dysfunctional. Hashem does not want us to be hurt or to put ourselves out for being abused. Let's just be very clear about that. Hashem does not want us to do the impossible. We're not supposed to be surviving through. I was recently speaking with somebody who thought that, she's supposed to be strong despite terrible abuse. That's not, Hashem doesn't want us to, that's not, Hashem gave us strength to be used in this world, not to survive despite abuse, but to thrive in this world as joyous, happy, productive, in an energized, loving life that connected, that we're supposed to have. So if something feels impossible, then in the presence of Hashem, it doesn't belong to me. It's not mine. It's not that I'm going to do it now and it's impossible. I guess it's a lot of work, put it that way. It's a lot of work, and coming back to, but I want to encourage you to keep coming back to that truth. And where something is making you feel anxious, there's I'm going to say there's a disalignment from God's truth. That's a really good question. So usually what we're talking about is our past. Everybody, one thing I want to just put out there, which I've said before, is that we don't understand Hashem's plan. you know, and a fundamental principle of our faith is that Hashem is good and that everything that he does is good. I don't understand how this could be good. And maybe I'll never will understand how certain things, I have no idea. Why did this little, somebody, I was devastated by recent news of a young mother passing away, what on earth? How could that be good? It doesn't, what on earth? Like, it doesn't, how is a young father supposed to raise these children on his own? Like, what's going on? Like, what is that? Of course, we don't understand Hashem's ways. And I don't want to even go close to answering that question. I just wanted to put that out there. I don't understand. And none of us should ever try to understand. At the same time, why should I trust Hashem today if yesterday he didn't, he did bad things? Somebody asked the same question about the Holocaust. Why are we trusting Hashem? If he allowed Hashem to have the Holocaust, then why are we trusting Hashem? And the answer is that is really where trust comes in, because, we trust that Hashem is good. That was an unusual experience. That was something out of the ordinary. That was something not an aberration of normal and something that we don't understand. But even when we don't understand, we understand that we don't understand and that we still believe Hashem is good. I'm not saying any tragedy is good. Do you hear what I'm saying? The tragedy itself, I'm not calling it good because I don't see it good. I'm a human person. But bitachon tells me, Emunah in Hashem tells me that he has a plan and he knows what he's doing. He knows what he's doing. He's leading us towards Geula. It's painful. It's laborious. It's too long, too many tears, too much suffering, too much pain, too much loneliness. We don't understand why, but at the same time, we do understand that Hashem is good. And certainly, I'm going to say something else and that is, my father, his yahrzeit was it yesterday? It was yesterday. He really wanted to come home from the hospital. After being in the hospital for a few weeks, he was almost ready to be discharged and come home. And he really wanted to come home. And he was talking to my sister and I on the phone. And he was saying how we were talking about, he was asking us how we can make it work. We should get help. He won't need too much help. Like, he was really, really, really wanted to go home. Medically, it was dangerous for him to come home, according to what the doctors were saying. And my sister very, very gently explained it to him that is dangerous for him to come home. Now, he knew more than we knew how dangerous it was for him to be in the hospital. He knew the loneliness. He knew he was hungry. He knew the care he was getting. He knew it was also dangerous for him to be in the hospital. But at one point in the conversation, he got it that just medically did not make sense for him to come home. And he was quiet for a long minute. And then he said, Gam zu l'tova. This too is for the best. And he said it with a voice choked with emotion. And then he repeated it again, Gam zu l'tova. And, I believe that he believed it. In that moment, as he said, Gam zu l'tova, he trusted Hashem to take care of him, no matter what the outcome would be. Even if I'm going to be, even in this dark space that I know is not good, it's good because I'm in Hashem's hands. And I don't know what it's, and that good comes without judgment of what I see. It's a good that's good because Hashem is in charge. It's a good that's deeper than my assessment of good. It's good because it's good. It's good because Hashem is good. Do you hear what I'm saying? He knew that it wasn't good, but he said Gam zu l'tova because he trusts Hashem, and Hashem is good. And I hope, to me that's the best. That to me epitomizes, he knew it was bad, but he said Gam zu l'tova because he's in Hashem's hands. And when we're in Hashem's hands, we're good. Even if we're not good. Someone said, a mother is always right. Even when she's wrong, she's right. Hashem is always good. Even when the situation is bad, from our perspective, Hashem is still good. And we could lean on Hashem because even in a situation that's bad, we're leaning on Hashem. We're leaning on the truth. We're leaning on our only support. We're leaning on our only real strength. We don't have anyone else. We don't have any other rock. He is our only rock. There is nothing else to lean on. What are we going to lean on? You know what I mean? You're absorbing. You're thinking. So I want to just say this in context of bring it back to the general topic of dealing with trauma. If somebody had an unpleasant experience, let's say at birth, okay, or let's say at a doctor's office, right? It would be silly to say, okay, trust in Hashem and everything is going to be okay. No, you got to also take Hashem wants us to take charge of whatever is in our possibility, or our sphere of influence, and say, okay, what is it that went wrong at that birth? Was I in the right doctor? Would I put myself in that doctor's care again? Would I go to that same hospital? Would I do the same thing I did last time? Probably not. What can I do differently that will help me not only feel safe, but be safe? And then beyond that, we really do need to lean on Hashem and trust that whatever happened was exactly as Hashem wanted it to happen, for reasons beyond our understanding, for a purpose that we might not even see, for a mission that is clear, right? Because the purpose of creation is for each of us to expose Hashem's truth in the world around us and in our own hearts and our own psyche. That's the purpose of creation, for each of us to come to a place of Umala haaretz deis Hashem, for the world to be filled with awareness and consciousness of Hashem. And we do that when we do a mitzvah, and we do that when we bring Hashem to our brokenness, and we ask Hashem to heal our brokenness, so that even our brokenness can be elevated and made to feel whole through Hashem's presence. That's the ultimate fulfillment of creation. But again, am I going to see that fulfillment? Am I going to experience it? No, but that definitely is a component of any trauma that we're dealing with, whether it's a childhood trauma of deeper brokenness or a more simple, focused, adult style traumatic experience. Yeah. Okay, so I'm so glad you brought this question. I'm going to say this for the purpose of the recording. How do we deal with the sense of abandonment from losing a parent at a young age? And the abandonment that comes with it, and that's with me for the rest. It's a new thing. I never had it before. And how do I deal with it? It seems like it will always be part of my life. And I want to say that I'm going to bring this back to the language of the Tanya. We always have a nefesh habahamis. And the Baal Tanya tells us very clearly not to fight with that sense of abandonment. That's not something that you're going to change. Don't even try. Don't go there. That's not, certainly at the beginning of your work, that's not our aim, is to get rid of this sense of abandonment that comes up. No, it's this, what are we going to do with that sense of abandonment? How am I going to find strength? How am I going to find healing? How am I going to invite connection and attachment and a sense of protection in my life, despite that feeling of abandonment? Do you hear it? It's a very, very, very big difference. You don't take a stick and say, get rid of the abandonment. Let's make the abandonment disappear. No, you want to just turn on the light of connection, of protection, of attachment, of Hashem's embrace. And that is a healing force to the abandonment. And the abandonment will still be triggered. The abandonment will still be triggered, but the healing will be more accessible, and the strength will be more accessible, and Hashem's protection will become more tangible and more real. That to me is the order of the work. It's not about getting rid of the abandonment. And I want to just read something from the chat that came up that I feel is very, very important to mention. Somebody writes that it's very important to distinguish between living in a state of hyper arousal, like constant fear and anxiety, versus walking into a situation that is objectively fearsome. And I thank you for bringing that to my attention, because when something is fearsome, that's a good thing that you feel afraid, and that's a sign to get safe and to do whatever you need to do to protect yourself and to make, get your body into a safe, into, get rid of the danger, or get away from the danger in that situation. Okay, this has been a really great conversation. I intended originally to get back to the Tanya, and to do a little bit of a refresher, but Be'ezus Hashem will do that next week. I want to just say that for those of you who are listening just to this part and you haven't heard the beginning of the Tanya, I really feel that, I use this visual of when a stick is when a branch on a tree is alive and it has the vitality of the tree, the energy of the tree, and the growing force of the tree. When you take that same branch and you disconnect it from the tree, it no longer is alive, it's dead. And it's a stick, it's not a branch, it's a stick. And so, really, our whole discussion, for this discussion to be helpful to you personally, it's really just a branch on the tree of our Tanya learning. It's just one little branch. And for those of you who have been listening to the rest of the classes, I'm sure you see that. You have a different understanding of what we're talking about. And you see it maybe more in light of the practical tools that we've been talking about in the past. And for those of you who are listening to the first time, I want to encourage you to, if this touched you in any way, listen to the rest of the series, because that's how the information that we talked about could become more complete, more alive, more organic, and more wholesome, and become an actual source of strength for you in your own journey of healing. I'm looking forward to joining together, Mitzvah Shem. Next week, we're going to be starting from the middle of chapter 12, but we'll refresh our memories about the beginning. I want to wish everyone a wonderful, happy Shabbos. And thank you so much for joining today. This was so meaningful.